Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and today we're going to take a look at some of my perfectly paired tarot and oracle combinations. So we're going to take a look at some of my favorite tarot and oracle pairings as well as some of my more unusual ones. So I thought we'd start out today with two of my favorite perfectly paired decks, and that is the Sacerdotal Tarot and the Oracle of Echoes. So, point in case here right off the bat, I have just shuffled both of these decks and I just cut the Sacerdotal and put half the deck aside so that we could have our cards be even so they'd be easier to see. And what immediately came up here is the Moon and Intuition. Now, how beautiful are these two cards together? Now, although the artwork of Stasia Burrington and Anatorian is a little bit different, I think that they're really compatible in the way that they look together. But more importantly than that, these two decks are really compatible in the way that they read. So here we have the Chariot with Father Time. I love that the Oracle of Echoes really pulls out a sort of deeper layer to the Sacerdotal. Three of Wands and creativity. And they really have this really wonderful conversation together because each of the Oracle of Echoes really does kind of pull out that underlying energy of the Sacerdotal. So here we have the Two of Cups and Spirit Guides. So if we were looking at the Two of Cups in terms of a relationship, maybe that is the relationship with our Spirit Guides. It's not looking towards our relationship with other people that exist in this time and place, but in those people that we have relationships that are maybe coming in to share experiences and kind of guide us along our journey. And I just love that these two decks really kind of play off each other in that particular way. So here we have the King of Wands with Warning. One of the things I do also really like about the Oracle of Echoes is that it does have a really nice balance of light and shadow in it. And like I said, even though the art styles are a little bit different in terms of, how the artwork is actually rendered, they do actually work beautifully together. But more importantly than that, it really is the messages that come through. So here we have the Eight of Cups and Courage. I love doing these little tarot and oracle flip throughs because I get so many wonderful intuitive hits just flipping through the cards in this way. And I haven't done anything special with these decks. I've taken them both out of their boxes, given them one shuffle, and put them on the table. And these are the messages that are just coming through in the cards as they are now. So here we have the Hanged Man and Healing. I mean, again, it really is all about the Oracle of Echoes pulling out that underlayer to the Sacerdotal. I think that both of these decks read really wonderfully on their own. The Oracle of Echoes is actually a balanced enough deck that you could totally read with it on its own. But pairing these two decks together just really brings out some gorgeous messages. And I really enjoy working with them. I do have other decks that I really enjoy working with the Oracle of Echoes with because we're primarily talking about Oracle this month. And I do have some others that I think work really beautifully with this deck. But this is one of my favorite pairings just in the way that these two decks really converse with each other. So the creator of the Oracle of Echoes, Anatorian, does have a matching tarot that is going to be released, I believe, mass market, called the Tarot of Echoes, and that's definitely one that I'm going to be getting because I think those two will probably pair really well together. But in terms of being wonderful reading pairs, I think the Sacerdotal Tarot and the Oracle of Echoes just work really beautifully together, and they have this really beautiful conversation that I think adds a lot of depth to your reading. So definitely two decks that I feel are really perfectly paired for each other. So another two decks that I think pair really beautifully together, both are indie decks and both by different creators, is the Carnival at the End of the World and the Oracle of Oddities. This one is the second. There are three of them. I have yet to get the 1 and 3, which are both definitely on my list, but this is by the same creator that did the Antique Anatomy Tarot. However, this is the indie oracle that she has created. One of the things that I really love about these two decks, I think they are very compatible in terms of their artwork. We definitely have that kind of weird, surreal energy to both of these decks. Things are just a little bit off center. and it definitely makes you look at things in a different way. But similar to the Sasrabito and the Oracle of Echoes, really what is happening with these two cards is, again, the Oracle is really pulling out those deeper messages from the tarot deck. So here we have the Emperor and Observe. And you can see here where this Emperor is like looking outwards, this card of Observing is looking upward. And so what we're getting here is this idea of we have to look within as well as without, right? In that Emperor energy, it tends to be really outward focused, but we have to remember that we have to look within us as well. It can't be all outward focused all the time. We need to take the time to observe things. And so I think those two work really beautifully together in bringing out these lovely messages. I do have to say that the Carnival at the End of the World, my copy has been trimmed. One of the ways that I use this particular pairing is to lay this as a card by card basis. So basically what I do would be to pull one card from the Carnival at the End of the World and one card from the Oracle of Echoes to help me expand upon it and understand that card. So here we have the Four of Wands and Divinity. And I think these work really well for helping to kind of bring about maybe what's going on underneath. So here we have the Hermit and Gluttony, but the Gluttony card here reminds us that we can't live in that hermit world, right? As much as we all, most of us anyway, really like to go into that hermit mode, we really like to do the self-exploration, we really like to dive deep, and we really like to uncover what's going on underneath. But the Gluttony card reminds us that we can't do that to excess, right? That can't be the only thing that we do. Eventually, we have to come out of the hermit's cave. And I know I've talked about this in other videos because it's definitely something that I personally struggle with, of making sure that I remember not to overdo that, right? Not to spend so much time in the hermit mode that I forget to actually take those things that I've learned and put them into practice in my real life. So here we have the Two of Wands with separation. So this is really interesting here, right? We have this idea of pairing, and these two figures are connected, and these two figures are in the process of being separated. They're the same kind of image though, right? The idea of two minds in one body. And to me, both of these cards really represent the idea of being of two minds. And this card reminds me that maybe in order to really explore this idea of this Two of Wands, we need to look at it from the idea of separating those two selves, or those two thought processes, or those two ways of being. So I think that's really fascinating, especially when we get cards like this where the imagery is really cohesive as well, where the imagery is basically telling the same story. This is just telling us, you're going to look at this as your traditional Two of Wands, but maybe look at it from the idea of separation and what might that reveal to you. And I think that's really beautiful. These are two decks that are both very kind of bizarre. In my personal experience with this deck, it makes me work a little harder for it, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's not right out there in front. There's so much more going on underneath. And the Oracle of Oddities really helps me to kind of tap into that idea of what is going on underneath. So here we have the High Priestess, and what's going on underneath her is knowledge. So I think that's really beautiful. These two decks, I think, pair really well together. The Five of Wands with toxic. Yep, the Five of Wands energy can be very toxic if we're not careful with it. Another two decks that I really enjoy pairing together that I don't know that I necessarily think of them as being really compatible in terms of their artwork, although I think they are. They do definitely have two different art styles. Again, these are both indie decks by two different artists, but I think they really do pair really beautifully together. So that is the Carnival at the End of the World and the Oracle of Oddities. So another perfectly paired combo we have here, which is really a lot about the aesthetics of the two decks and how they work together on a sort of design or really aesthetic level, is the Pagan Otherworlds and the Botanical Inspirations. I think that these two decks, because they both have a really sort of age, kind of old worldly style to them, they work really well together. in terms of how they look on your table. But again, the messages are really succinct between the two of them most of the time as well. So here we have the Page of Swords with enthusiasm and friendship. And that's one of the things that I do a lot with the Botanical Inspirations, is that I allow it to provide the energy or sort of the focal point of the reading, and then I use the tarot to expand upon it. So it kind of works more of as an energetic or a kind of baseline message for your reading. So when we're looking at the Six of Pentacles, we're looking at, of course, our traditional foundation, our traditional tarot interpretation for the Six of Pentacles. But again, how can we look at that through the lens of enlightenment? The artwork itself, the design of the card really does lend to that idea of the sacred lotus, of opening up to that enlightenment, as we see here with the butterflies, and we see the pentacles all stacking, moving upward, growing, reaching towards that higher level. I think that's really beautiful. I think that there's a lot that you could really explore just in doing this card by card as well. So here we have the Knight of Wands with faithfulness and modesty. So how could we explore the Knight of Wands through that lens? And as you'll see here, I'm definitely picking more up on the keywords on this particular deck, but you could also tie into the plant energy if you are really familiar with that. You could also tie into the quotes down at the bottom, and that works really well too. So if we're looking here at this Six of Cups and we're tying into the quote more than anything, it says, nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. And doesn't this card really give you that idea? Because it definitely does get the idea of nature blooming in its own time, of abundance coming from the slow growth that we find in nature. Or if we tie the cups into the idea of emotions, the slow growth that comes, the abundance that comes from letting our emotions be what they need to be, of letting them evolve naturally. And I think that's really gorgeous. So here we have the Sun with domestic happiness and devoted affection. Again, pulling back in those keywords. Here's a good example of where we could also start tying in maybe some colors. So the purple on both the kind of center point, really more at her breast, the purple at her breast and the purple of the flowers really tie in together. We have the green of the field behind her and the green in the leaves. You know, we have the yellow butterfly, and we can kind of see that yellow reflected in the little moon charms hanging down from her book. The whole parchment page background of the card itself, of the oracle deck itself, you know, tying back into the pages of a book. And so there's so many different levels and layers that you could really dive into each of these cards. I do just want to also throw in a mass market deck that I quite enjoy pairing with the Botanical Inspirations. So here we have the Green Witch Tarot, which is a mass market deck. And this is one that I recently just shared in my September favorites pairings that I was working with. And I really love the way that these two decks work together. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I did talk about that in that video as well. But here we have the Eight of Athmes and Hidden Secrets. I really love the underlying energy or the underlying message that the Botanical Inspirations brings out of the Green Witch Tarot. But I think this is another really beautiful pairing to work with together. And of course, whereas the Pagan Otherworlds is a indie deck, it can be a little bit more on the spendy side. These two decks are both mass market and both readily available, so makes it a little bit easier to get a hold of these ones. And I really think that they just work beautifully together. So here we have nature with immersion and intuition. And then the quote says, when you reach the end of what you should know, you will be at the beginning of what you should sense. And how beautiful does that quote tie in with what we see going on in this card, right? We've reached the end of what we know. We've got the hunter here setting the trap for the bear. And then the idea of, you know, we're at the beginning of what we should sense. So we're at the beginning of what really is going on here. And I think that's just really beautiful. So again, another two decks that I really enjoy working with together. So for this one, we had the Green Witch Tarot, the Botanical Inspirations, and also the pagan other worlds. And these 3 decks, I think, work really well together, of course, to pair these 2 together and to pair these 2 together. But if you want to have a lot of fun with them, pair all 3, because that's a lot of fun as well. So another 2 decks that I think pair perfectly, both in terms of the artwork and in terms of the messages, is the Dreaming Way Tarot and the Roots and Wings Oracle. So this is, of course, a mass market deck, and this one is a indie oracle. And I am going to show you a mass market oracle that I also pair with the Dreaming Way here in just a moment, but I want to focus on these 2 first because these are the 2 that I use together most frequently. So whereas in our past pairings, we've kind of been looking at how the oracle deck really pulls out sort of a deeper layer, a deeper message from the tarot deck. In this particular pairing, I feel it's a little bit more reversed. I feel like the Dreaming Way Tarot really provides that solid foundation for the message and for the reading. And the Oracle, the Roots and Wings Oracle, really is kind of like a and then. So here we have the 2 of Wands, which then leads to transformation. So if you can see what I'm saying, it's kind of like a here's the base and here's where we're going. And so in this respect, I don't really use it the oracle in terms of setting the energy. It's really kind of a like, and then what comes next. And it's just really interesting how different oracle decks, oracle and tarot decks, I think kind of converse with each other, for lack of a better term. I do totally personify my deck, so I apologize if that's, not something that you do, but I feel like they do sort of have a conversation. And for me, the conversation that these 2 decks have is the Dreaming Way Tarot is like telling me what's going on, like the here and now. And the Roots and Wings is telling me, okay, but here's where you need to go from here. And that's just kind of the way that they sort of speak to each other when I work with them together. So here we have the 9 of Cups. So we're feeling like if we're looking at the artwork in this particular 9 of Cups, you get almost a sort of 4 of Cups vibe to it. Like she's a little bit disenchanted with all of these cups. And the Rise card from the Roots and Wings kind of gives me that idea of we have to kind of rise above that in order to see the abundance of the cups, right? We have to kind of get out of this collection of cups, rise above it so that we can see what's really going on here. And in that sense, I think that these 2 decks work really beautifully together. So here we have the 3 of Wands and intuition. So the 3 of Wands is really like, this is what's going on right now. And the Roots and Wings is telling me, okay, and here's what you need to do with that energy, right? So you need to tap into your intuition with that energy. The 10 of Cups with hope. 9 of Swords with the voice. So again, just really different ways that you can look at, pairing these tarot and oracle decks together. I mean, you could certainly look at the Roots and Wings as being a deeper level to the Dreaming Way. So here we have the High Priestess with wisdom, right? The High Priestess is all about that inner wisdom. And again, this card would really remind us to focus in on the wisdom that we gain when we listen to our inner voice. And that's definitely a way that you can tie these 2 together. So here we have 2 of Swords with inspiration, right? You have a decision maybe that you need to make, and you need to look at maybe which of those 2 decisions are really providing you with the inspiration that you need. So again, we're back to the Dreaming Way is the foundation, and the Roots and Wings is really the kind of and then what type of deck. That's kind of how I see it. So just really beautiful. I think the artwork works really well together as well. I think that aesthetically speaking, they work really well together. I have, of course, trimmed my Dreaming Way, so it normally has white borders. I've cut 3 of the sides off and just left the titles at the bottom. But other than that, I think that borders or no borders, I think that they really work well together. And I do like the white space that's in the Roots and Wings Oracle. It kind of creates some breathing space around the image itself. And then you pair that with what is now my trimmed copy of the Roots and Wings. And it really makes for a really wonderful experience with the deck itself. And how I tend to work with my tarot and oracle is usually to have, one tarot on either side of my oracle. And so my reading would look more like this, whereas my, oracle card would be in the middle, and this is what's going on around that. So that's always interesting to look at, I think. So two great pairings, the Roots and Wings Oracle with the Dreaming Way Tarot. But I also want to pull in another mass market deck, because again, sometimes those indie decks are just a little bit, you know, hard to get a hold of. And so I want to show you whenever I can the sort of alternatives that I use. So here we have the Dreaming Way with the Hedge Witch Botanical. And again, we're talking about a deck that has a lot of white space, and I think that's one of the ways that they work really well together. But we're also getting the same sort of kind of energy, I think, that we do in the Roots and Wings. We're getting that really earthy, kind of grounded energy that really kind of tells us, like, and then what? What do we need to do with that Five of Swords energy? We need to stabilize it. Aesthetically speaking, I think these two decks really work very well together as well. Perhaps better because I feel like these have a really similar art style. They have the kind of the line drawing with the vibrant, rich colors and lots of white in both of these decks. Not only do we have all the white space in the Hedge Witch Botanical, but we also have the white space that, or the white pops that really catch your eye in the Dreaming Way Tarot. And if you kind of pay attention to color, if color is something that you work with in your readings, paying attention to what is in color and what is left white in the Hedge Witch Botanical, as well as where are the pops of white in the Dreaming Way Tarot, can be really interesting. So here you see that the cups are, you know, they are black and white, but in some of the cups, the black is more predominant. In some of the cups, the white is more predominant. And here we have the same kind of light and dark balance in this adaptation card, where we have some of the leaves are left completely white, some of the flowers are left completely white, yet all the berries are darker. So that's an interesting thing to pick up on if you're really looking at the artwork within the deck. Here again, we can see color play. We have this beautiful yellow, kind of orangey yellow color, which is mirrored over here in this particular person's outfit. And so I might really look at that person in particular, and how does that person tie into what's going on within my reading, and how does that tie into what's going on within this card. So I think that's really just a really interesting way to also experience working with the Tarot and Oracle together. These two I think work even better than the Roots and Wings, to be perfectly honest, but I do really like the grounded and more and variety of artwork that we see in the Roots and Wings, whereas the Hedge Witch Botanical is all plants. But I think in terms of aesthetically, I think these two are a better match. In terms of the messages, I really do like the messages that we get between the Roots and Wings and the Dreaming Way. But I think that these two are a beautiful, really compatible same type of energy is what I'm trying to get at. They work very similar for me, whether I'm using the Hedge Witch Botanical, the Roots and Wings here. They have a similar kind of grounded energy. So another couple of beautiful pairings. We have the Dreaming Way Tarot that I often pair with the Hedge Witch Botanical, as well as the Roots and Wings Oracle. And again, if you really wanted to do something really special, try all three together and see what kind of messages you get out of that, because that's really fun too. So another beautiful pairing that I really like working with together is the Hudes Tarot and the Illuminated Earth Oracle. Now I'm going to actually show you this deck, the Oracle deck, with a mass market deck that is readily available as well, because the Hudes Tarot is out of print and can be a little bit difficult to find. But these are two of my favorite pairings. I really like the use of texture, and that's really what I think is so compatible about these two decks. Really what I think picks up between these two decks is the fact that the Hudes Tarot has a lot of different patterns and textures going on in the clothing, and we can see how that might play into the patterns and textures going in on the Illuminated Earth. There is a new deck by Claire Mack, which I have done a walkthrough of as well, called the Faceted Garden, and that's one that I also want to work with, pairing with the Hudes Tarot. But I've really only worked with the Illuminated Earth so far, because again, that's one that I've had quite a bit longer. But again, the messages are really cohesive as well. So here we have Justice with Retreat. This is a beautiful one. The Lovers with Concealed. Like, what is going on beneath that choice that you're making? What's the underlying issue? I think I skipped a card. I don't like when I do that because I feel like it throws things off. Here we have the Nine of Cups with Tempest. This is a really interesting one because we tend to think of the Nine of Cups as being, you know, this really wonderful card of abundance, but that's a lot of cups hanging over his head too. And sometimes that that sort of dynamic flow of emotion, that really building up of emotion, that can be kind of fueling an underlying storm beneath all of that. So I think that's really interesting. Here we have the Knight of Pentacles with Underworld, right? He's going out, he's moving along, but maybe what he needs to be moving towards is that underworld energy, that diving deeper within. So again, just really, really interesting way to look at the different decks and to look at the different pairings. So this, of course, is the Hudes Tarot, but I do want to share with you a sort of new... let's just pull another card, a new deck that I've been exploring working with this one. And this is the Hush Tarot, and it is a mass market deck that is readily available now. And I do believe the Illuminated Earth is still available, although it is an indie deck. This is a deck that I'm still exploring. I still have not really developed a relationship with. I'm working through that, and that's definitely something that I will be talking about in an upcoming video because it's been interesting to say the least. But I do think that these two decks, again, aesthetically pair really well together. They have the same kind of framework where we have the outer border here, the thin outer border with the title, and this has the number, but in the Illuminated Earth, we have this symbol at the top. And really similar color palette between these two. Obviously, really different art styles in between Jeremy Hush's work and Claire Mack's work, but I think they work really well to have a beautiful conversation. And this is one that I've been just kind of starting into the work with, into exploring. Like I said, the Hush Tarot I'm still really getting to know, so I don't have a whole lot of experience to draw on as far as pairing these two decks together. But the little bit that I have done, I'm really, really liking. And again, we'll hopefully be talking about that more in an upcoming video. But again, if you're looking for a deck that is actually available, because the Hudes is not, it is out of print and hard to find. So the Hush Tarot might be a good alternative if that's one that, you know, you already have in your collection or maybe looking to get. Beautiful. Five of Cups with this healing card here. Gorgeous. So that's another couple of decks that I really enjoy pairing with the Illuminated Earth Oracle. Like I said, I do have the Faceted Garden by the same creator, and so that is one that I'm going to be working with as well and finding pairings to work with it. But for the Illuminated Earth, I very consistently work with it with the Hudes Tarot, and I think that that's beautiful. And I'm just now kind of exploring the relationship between the Illuminated Earth and the Hush Tarot, and that's one that I'm really looking forward to diving into a little bit deeper. So the last little pairing that I want to share with you is the Flowers of the Night Oracle, which is a mass market deck by Rockpool, and the Moon Void Tarot, which is an indie deck, but it is a relatively affordable one. These two decks, I think, I feel like they were made for each other. The Moon Void is primarily a black and white deck with just some pops of color here and there, which really does mirror the same kind of aesthetic that we have in the Flowers of the Night Oracle. But again, the messages are really wonderful. So here we have the Tower with awareness. I think that these two decks they pair really beautifully together. The artwork, I think, is really compatible. But I think that the messages are also really wonderful as well, in the way that the Moon Void kind of taps into the energy of the Flowers of the Night. So here we have the Eight of Wands with sensitivity. It can be a lot to take on. That energy of the Eight of Wands can be really overwhelming. We can be kind of sensitive to it. And I think that that's really interesting. Here we have the Magician with intimacy. So pairing these together, you know, sometimes really asks you to look at things in a different way. And I think that this is a wonderful way to explore kind of the deeper layers and look at your tarot deck in a different way. You know, sometimes we tend to fall into this kind of routine with our interpretations. You know, we see the magician and it means the same thing to us every time. I think that pairing it with an oracle really does help you to kind of step outside of that comfort zone and look at how could we look at the magician in terms of intimacy. I mean, if you look at this magician, she's completely naked. That's a very intimate place to be. It's very vulnerable. You know, the relationship between the flowers and the knight can be really an intimate one. The relationship between the magician and her tools can be a really intimate one. So I think it's really wonderful to help us kind of explore the tarot card through a different lens. So here we have the Ace of Swords. So that idea of new ideas, right? Of the beginning of the sword suit. Sometimes that new idea, that beginning again, comes from death. It comes from change and transition, of the death of one way of thinking and the opening to a new way, which I think is really interesting. Here we have the Hierophant with compassion. Here we have the Hanged Man with freedom. Looking at things from a different perspective, that can definitely bring some freedom. And here we have this little creature here, which I think is a sloth. It looks like a sloth to me, so very slow moving. The Hanged Man is also a very slow moving card, right? We get the idea that this freedom is not going to come quickly. We're going to have to sit in that hangman energy for a while. We're going to have to take it slow. We're going to have to spend some time in it. And I think that these really work beautifully together, aesthetically speaking as well. I love the play of black and white with the pops of color that we get in both decks. I think that's really wonderful. So again, two lovely decks that I think are just really perfectly paired for each other. I think that they have a really great conversation between the two of them. And I love being able to look at the imagery and the play of light and shadow and the pops of color and to pull that into the readings as well. So that is the Flowers of the Night Oracle and the Moon Void Tarot. I hope you enjoyed this look at some of my favorite tarot and oracle combinations. We'll be exploring more of these types of pairings again soon. Thank you for joining me today. You will find links for the decks featured here in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed this video and will join me again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.